Hi everyone, this is Leatherass with dragthebar.com. Today we're playing two tables of 50 cent $1, no limit, 6 max on black chip poker. And today we're going to, focus a lot on basically how to exploit this type of game, these stakes. And I purposefully played less tables than sometimes I do. Sometimes I play 4 for the videos, but in this video I thought we'd allow ourselves a little bit more time to discuss some of the situations that come up, and so we're going to play 2 tables today. Here with the ace-6 suited on the button, a few different options. I'm going to start by just go ahead and calling, and sometimes I 3-bet it. Sometimes I fold it depending on what I think of my opponent. So we got a couple marginal spots here. I'm going to go ahead and check back with the king-9 here. And here with the ace-6, he chooses not to c-bet. I think he's probably just giving up. It's kind of a wet board. And I'm going to go ahead and just continue to check here with my king-9. And just kind of hope to check it down. He goes ahead and bets. It could be as a bluff because he basically needs a heart to be betting here for value, but I think overall we're just going to be beat more often than not. We could turn our hand into a bluff on the turn. I think that's perfectly fine. I also think that we could bet the flop from time to time. I think that would be totally fine as well. So here we're just with the ace-9, we open from the cutoff. I'm just going to go ahead and make a standard continuation bet. And here at the ace-jack suited, I actually prefer just calling. Some people 3-bet here, but I think the hand plays really well and creates a lot of situations where you can run some post-flop semi-bluffs. This isn't a great flop for a hand, obviously. We have, backdoor flush, backdoor straight, just not really the best spot here, not the flop we're looking for, so I don't mind just a check fold there. I'll go ahead and top up a little. Fold the 8-6. The reason I don't like 3-betting it so much is because I just think the hand plays so much better keeping the stacks a little more shallow and then making some post-flop bluffs as opposed to 3-betting it, and then I might be playing against a range that's every bit as strong as mine, if not stronger. I can get myself into some tough spots when an ace flops. Not really sure if I should be value betting the entire way because my kicker can certainly be worrisome, and I'll be out of position. So I just think that post-flop it opens up a lot more possibilities to win the pot and maybe get myself in a position where I can dominate my opponent because he's in there with presumably not as good of a range as a hand like I have. Here at the Jack-3, I could just fold pre-flop. I'll go ahead and pot the ace-jack off into the big blind. I could just go ahead and fold pre-flop. I can also bet. I think either one is fine. Or, raise the button. I think either one is fine. Here at the ace-jack, pretty decent flop to a continuation bet. It doesn't generally hit him too hard. And not the worst card in the world to barrel again. And not a great card on the turn to barrel there with the Jack-3. But I'm going to go ahead and follow through with a bet here. I've picked up, a straight draw to the nuts. And he pretty quickly calls, which makes me think he either has like a hand like ace-deuce of hearts that backed into a flush, or he has a queen that probably won't fold. So I'm going to go ahead and give up. And I'll value bet this river here. I don't think that he has a king that would play it this way. I think it's more likely to be something like a 6. So yeah, we get a little value there by making top pair on the river, which is nice. He had pocket 9s. I think I probably could have got him to fold there. I think when he calls on the turn, that's probably towards the bottom of his range. I think a lot of times when he calls the turn, he has some type of pair with maybe a draw, maybe a backdoor flush or a queen that probably will just call down no matter what. And so he did quickly call on the turn, which does tell me something. but I think overall, it does sort of tell me that possibly he's not quite as strong as maybe I'm giving him credit for. But then again, I don't think he just quickly calls with a 6 either like that. I think it would have to be a little bit better. You would think he would have at least some decision with a 6 on the turn. So I sort of assumed, I guess, that he was on a pair that picked up a draw on the turn, or a hand like a top pair with a queen. Probably with not a great kicker because he didn't raise the flop. I assume if he had a hand like king queen, he probably wouldn't be too afraid of raising the flop and be willing to go broke. My opponent here leads, which is a little weird. Oftentimes people don't lead with a 4 like this. There's not a lot of draws. It could just be a bluff. It could be a 10. Let's go ahead and just run a fun little bluff here. Let's just sort of make him have a 4. Because a lot of times, it just goes ahead and mucks pretty quickly. A lot of times this is just leading out because he knows it's really hard for someone to have a pair, or it's like a weak 10 and he's just not going to like getting raised. He might just call the flop and then fold the turn type of thing. I don't think my opponent leads with a 4 too super often, so I think that raising there is a pretty decent option. Here with the I don't like it if you're just going to raise the flop though and give up. I think I would bet the turn and maybe even the river a lot. I guess by the turn my opponent probably makes his decision. Probably has a weaker 4 or something, like a weakish 4 I should say, if he calls the flop raise and then just continues to sort of call down. Maybe not seeing a lot of value in putting in a lot of action with sort of a weak 4, and would just sort of call down and induce bluffs and not lose too much when his 4 is outkicked. Okay, so my understanding here of the people on black chip, even at these stakes, is that they do like to 3-bet a lot out of the blind, so I think he can be pretty wide. With that being said, I don't mind just 4-betting and getting in a hand like 10s from the cutoff to the big blind. And that it's possible it could be a small mistake, but the hand, there's overcards that flop a lot, and he does go ahead and go all in, so I'll go ahead and call it off and hope for the best. So it looks like we have a flip here. So far we're good, and now we're not good. So we lose that one. No big deal. We'll get some more chips here. And I like King Jack suited. I think that hand, much like the Ace Jack suited, plays well post flop, so I'll go ahead and call. And not really a great flop. It's hard for me to represent much, and it's just pretty hard to represent much here, and he's sort of in the better position to represent a strong hand. I mean, if I thought my opponent was particularly nitty, sometimes I might just check raise him and bet the turn and jam the river and just hope that he can fold an overpair at some point. But without knowing much about my opponent, I think check folding is the play. It's somewhat dry, and I can represent a set pretty well, and it's hard for him to really have big hands on that board. It certainly wouldn't be a big deal at all to go ahead and check raise and just sort of represent a set the whole way if I thought my opponent would eventually fold. Here with the king queen, sometimes I 3-bet it, sometimes I fold it. A lot depends on. I rarely call. I call a suited because, again, I think it plays better post flop. And maybe my opponent raises too much from early position, which means I could have 3-bet the king queen. So I'll go ahead and 3-bet him with king 3 suited here on the button. And if he's going to be opening pretty wide under the gun, he's going to not have very many hands he can continue with from this spot. And obviously I'm not basing that on a lot of information at this point, just seeing back-to-back hands that he opened from early, so he might be opening all his suited connectors and stuff like that. But he pretty quickly makes a pot-committing 4-bet, so we'll just go ahead and fold here. And that's fine. I mean, it's certainly not a bad thing to be taking some shots there from the button and just sort of, continuing to apply the pressure on your opponent. And it can also create a lot of opportunities, especially if I feel like my opponent flats too much from out of position to a 3-bet, in which case they're ideal candidates to make these sort of positional raises with hands like what I have, and occasionally make a well-disguised monster and maybe win a big pot, but pretty often watching him do things like the flop comes Jack 7 deuce and check calls a hand like pocket 8s or 9s one time, and you just keep barreling, and eventually they get off, and you can win like half a stack in those spots, which is definitely one of my more favorite plays against opponents who make that mistake. And I think it's good to test out your opponents early in a session and see if they're the type of people that make that mistake, because if they are, even though they can be otherwise good players, that's a really exploitable leak. People that tend to open too wide under the gun and then call too light to 3-bets and then sort of play fit or fold post flop. And there's a lot of those guys out there, and it's important to put pressure on people and try and identify those opponents, because when you do, there can be a lot of value in them. And I think Queen 8 suited's plenty of hand from the button to go ahead and open. And when my opponent jams all in for 40 blinds, there's really not a whole lot that I can do but fold there. So this video will be part 1 of a 2-part series. We'll just go ahead and keep playing, but we'll divide the video into 2 separate releases. And I think these are good stakes. I mean, I know a lot of you guys are playing these stakes and want to know, you want to see how some of us coaches play these games and be able to apply that to your own game. So I think making a 2-part video here makes sense. And of course, I'll be around in the forums if anybody wants to ask any clarifying questions within the video. Here at the King-Queen, we just talked about a mistake of calling too light out of position. I would define King-Queen as calling too light out of position against most opponents. And I just talked about how big a mistake that was, so clearly we don't want to just go ahead and make that exact mistake right away. So went ahead and folded that hand. So one good thing about playing less tables, too, is to be able to really sort of observe my opponents and be able to watch a lot more what they do and see if we can pick up on some exploitable tendencies. So far, the games look pretty... I mean, these tables definitely don't look good. It's possible everybody I'm playing against is sort of a lower limit grinder. I'm not seeing a whole lot of limping or otherwise exploitable plays. It looks fairly solid. So which means we'll have to look for additional ways for value, such as what I talked about just a bit earlier in testing people out when they maybe open too light and maybe play a little fit or fold post flop. So here at the Ace-8, we do get a caller. I guess we just go ahead and call here. I don't see too big a mistake in that. We'll go ahead and looks like we timed out there with the 6-10. Probably good to just fold anyway. I could isolate by making it 5x, but my hand isn't that good, and I don't really know much about this opponent just yet. I don't know what his ranges are like when he's limping under the gun. I don't know, how well he plays post flop. But here, I do think we have the best hand almost always when it gets checked through. I don't think anybody check a 9 or a flush draw. So I'm going to go ahead and lead out for value and make a decision on how to best get value on the river. For example, if I called and the river was, say, like a blank king, which would probably be a brick a lot of the time, one that didn't fill in any draws, I would likely check call and try and induce bluffs from, the the ace-high flush draw or the straight draw that picked up on the turn. I might also bet it for value from time to time, depending on what the river was. So here with the king 10 suited and the ace 6, I think these are probably both folds for the most part. Sometimes on the turn we could float that flop from time to time with king 10 suited, and if I thought my opponent was fairly fit or fold, there's a lot of cards that could either come in to improve my hand to the best hand more often than not, or I could pick up a backdoor club draw, or I could there'd be a card that come in that might induce a check from him, in which case his hand gets pretty face up as either, definitely a hand he's not wanting much more money to go in the pot, or a hand that he's just giving up on. So maybe an opportunity there to float one. But then if my opponent's very aggressive, then my opponent will use all those cards to represent, in which case I'm left with the option of either making a sort of dark bluff, what I might call a dark bluff, in the sense that I don't really have a lot of information. I'm just making it because I think my opponent doesn't have a big hand often enough. But again, without knowing a whole lot about my opponent, I probably opted for a little bit more of the conservative line. Here with the 6-7, I don't mind. I think there's a lot of hands worse than mine that will just go ahead and put a lot of money in post-flop, and there's very rarely a hand that I'm in bad shape against. So I don't mind raising with the willingness to get the money in, or maybe sort of turning my hand into a bluff a lot of the time by betting, and then if it gets called, maybe his hand looks like a hand like pocket nines or something, and I can use a lot of turn cards to play him off that hand. But now we'll just go ahead and go all in after he re-raises and hope for the best. And that was not the best. That was not good. So, very unfortunate set of circumstances there to run into a hand like that. And we'll probably just go all in because we don't have much, and I don't really care. It can't be a big mistake either way. We had I guess we did have 30 blinds. I thought we had 25 blinds. But anyway, it just doesn't really matter too much what you do there. Just don't fold pre-flop. 30 blinds, I guess it might have been a small mistake to go ahead and shove all the money in there. I thought I had 24 blinds. I misread the board there. There are some short stack strategies you can use to maybe maximize value a little bit better there with 25 blinds than just shoving all in, but I do think it'd be profitable to shove all in, probably with up to 20 blinds. Maybe I'm a little rusty. So get a check, and we sort of have nothing. I don't mind just making a little stab here, and maybe I'll use some turn cards to sort of continue with a bluff. But I do think I'm going to get check raised a lot on that flop, and I do get check raised. And maybe if I had something a little more marginal or something, I might go ahead and check back. But when I just kind of have completely nothing, I don't mind just taking a little stab, because I do think it'll fold often enough for it to be profitable, or for it to be a better option than checking back. And the 9 deuce will just go ahead and fold. There's not really going to be a case for raising 4-10 off from the small blind. And pretty good flop to continuation bet, and hope to take it down fairly often. And we get the quick call, which we know from this guy can be a pretty marginal hand. So I'd probably go ahead and just keep barreling this, especially with this turn card. It's kind of a no-brainer on the turn to go ahead and bet. And he calls again, which is kind of interesting when we get an awful river card that sort of gives every hand 2 pair. I hate to let this guy go to showdown again with a hand like 9s, but I think it'd be hard for him to have a hand as weak as a pocket 9, so yeah, it was a king-queen, and chose not to value bet it, which is a pretty big mistake in my opinion. I don't know why you would expect me to check a better hand on the turn. Might be playing a lot of tables and just not really thinking. But that's a really poor missed value bet there on his part. I think the top end of my checking range on the turn might be like King Jack or something, and even then I'm betting it a lot. So not a huge fan of that. And he didn't really think about it either. So that alone is enough to call it a mistake, because if you're not thinking about what is pretty clearly not a layup decision, then that alone is a mistake. So we are picking up some things on this river ratty. Here with the ace-queen, just 2 backdoor draws and an over, and he quickly folds. So yeah, I've kind of got this guy pegged as sort of this multi-tabling guy that's just sort of on autopilot, not really thinking too much about otherwise potentially tricky decisions. So we're gonna keep that in mind when playing pots with him. Jack-9 suited, probably a little light for opening under the gun like I just did there, but for video purposes I think it's always good to get in there as much as possible. I think just presents the opportunity for more content basically. So if it's close, I just tend to take those spots in the video unless I'm trying to illustrate a specific point. Jack-10 suited, 100 blinds. I really don't want to get 4-bet and lose the chance to play this hand, and it plays so well post-flop that I don't really see a good case being made for doing anything other than calling. And I do like kind of a bluff raise here, because I think this board doesn't hit him a lot, and he sort of just quickly bet. And, against good opponents, really strong opponents, they're going to realize that I don't have a whole lot to represent either. I mean, I have the flush draws, but I guess what I'm getting at is if I did it all the time, a really strong opponent would realize that I can't have much of a hand either. Or I can't have a hand that wants to raise often enough either. But early in a session, against opponents I don't know, I'm inclined to think that they're going to give me credit for some hand that probably won't fold, like a king or a set or a flush draw. And so I think he's going to play fairly fit or fold there. So just went ahead and made a little bluff raise, and it's fine because I do have 2 backdoors as well. I mean, I can get queen. Any queen, ace, or 9 on the turn gives me a backdoor straight, and any diamond draw, maybe I barrel that because I think he just has a king when he calls, and I can represent the flush. And then I had backdoor spades, so especially if a card like the queen of spades or I guess the queen of spades is the only one that gives me an open ender on the turn. Can come, so I guess that's only one out. But you get my point. There can be some hands that if he just calls, I can represent, and we know he's not going to have a hand to raise back so often that it would make my bluff not profitable. So I don't mind a little flop sort of test raise there. And we'll go ahead and open 7-9 suited, although that's a little light and I probably wouldn't normally recommend that. So we're getting a lot of playable hands, which is good. There's nothing worse than getting dealt 9-3 off the entire time. I like especially live. I'm actually recording this shortly after getting back from the World Series of Poker, and I had some stretches there where I just never, ever got a hand. I mean, I'm talking 9-3 off for hours, and that's really frustrating. And you just would just die for even a 7-9 suited in spots like that. So I'm not going to be passing these up, especially at these stakes when we're making a video. We get the sort of quick call, and we're certainly going to have to pay off a river bet if, for example, the river bricked and he let out. So I don't mind putting the money in now and continuing to charge worse pocket pairs and spade draws. And I think from time to time I'm going to be basically value betting a 10 for him. And so now is sort of an interesting spot where I'm thinking about turning my hand into a bluff. But I might be good often enough to not really need to do that. And I might not always play a 10 off their hand anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and check back and take the showdown. And so, yeah, I felt that, I was going to see a lot of those hands. I was also going to see a lot of pocket eights and, Jack 10 and stuff like that too. It was real close. I don't mind turning my 7 into a bluff there. I think it's fine. It was real close. I probably overall just variance reducing reasons, I'd probably check back a little more often than I bet there. But it's also good for balance too. I mean, there are times, believe it or not, you'll get called there with that King Jack suited against really good opponents who feel like they're just getting barreled a lot, and that their king high is actually good a decent percentage of the time. I shouldn't say you'll get called a lot. You will see occasional calls, I will say, because he sort of has pretty much like the nut no pair, and it's definitely going to be he definitely is going to be good a not insignificant percentage of the time. So ace king, I chose to just sort of play it very straightforwardly, just 4-bet and get the money in. So here against our friend here who plays very straightforward, I've got a playable hand, 2 blockers to really strong hands, like a king and a jack. It blocks some possibilities as he has a hand like ace king, kings, jacks. Not a humongous factor, but it's some factor. And then we get cold 4-bet, which I think is, given the dynamic, is pretty much always a hand. He made it really small too, which is weird. I don't want to get sucked into flopping, something marginal and not really, and sort of getting myself in a tough spot. I think it's better to just give up on it now. So we haven't had a whole lot of success so far in this video with 3-betting in position with playable hands. But overall, it's actually a really good play. I really like 3-betting those types of hands. I think they play pretty well against the calling ranges of my opponents, because I think oftentimes they just go broke with ace-king. They fold king-queen a lot, so when you flop a king, it's generally good. They tend to call a lot with the Jack 10 suiteds and the pocket pairs, and they tend to 4-bet their really strong hands and sort of fold their weak marginal hands. And so I think what happens a lot of time is, he calls the hand like pocket 10s, and the flop is, king high or jack high, and I get a little bit of value maybe post flop, or my opponent flops a couple of overs and checks folds, even if it's a flop like, queen ace 6 or something. He's just going to check fold his pocket 10s, and I win that way. If the flop's like 9-4 deuce, they tend to like check call pocket 10s a lot, and tend to not take them all the way to showdown unimproved. And so I like sort of stringing them along to maybe like it goes 9-5 deuce, let's say, they check call, 7 on the turn, check call, 3 on the river, check, I bet, all in, they throw up. They sometimes call, but mostly fold. I kind of like playing poker like that, where I put my opponents in those types of positions. And then if the river is like ace, you just like jam all in and they always fold. And then you win, and it's a way to sort of not only win chips, but to deepen stacks, which also can play to your advantage the better you play poker. And what I mean by that is if I can win these sort of half stacks from getting him to just fold by the river in these 3-bet pots, because I generally try and leave about a half pot, or excuse me, about half my original stack for an all-in on the river shove, then I'm winning half stacks, and you can sort of build, from 100 to 220, 230 by doing that a few times, which is kind of nice. I'm going to go ahead and 3-bet jacks, and I will certainly be willing to get all the money in if he 4-bets. And so we get a sort of a tough spot here. I actually think it's a pretty decent spot to check call for your stack, because I think that he has to have a pretty good queen to keep betting the turn, or excuse me, for just to continue to fire the whole way. And it's much more likely that they would just see a check and they would just think that that's a green light, and they'll get folds eventually, and then they will just keep barreling at it. And so I think it's not a bad spot to just check call down for your stack, and sometimes they're value betting you with the monster or a good queen, and you lose, but it's a pretty good option overall. There might be some turn and river combinations that you eventually get away from your hand, but for the most part, you'd just be check calling the whole way. But I think by betting, you don't really know what he's peeling with, and it just makes it really tough to sort of... You don't want to bet and then check call and then check throw up. I don't want to be in that spot. I'd rather just sort of commit to some action that I think is profitable and go from there. So ace-king off, we'll just play this straightforwardly for now. We'll 3-bet and see what happens and get a pretty quick fold. Nothing much going there. I like the way this session's going so far. I think it's been interesting. We're getting some pretty good spots, and maybe almost too many good spots, because I'm not able to quite elaborate on everything the way I had sort of advertised at the start of the video that I was hoping to do. But hopefully we're making up for it in volume. Queen deuce suited here, just go ahead and open the button. I don't mind. You could min raise pretty much your entire range if you wanted to. I mean, I do that from time to time. Nanonoko, who most of you know, he and I may be the two biggest mid-stakes winners in online poker history. If I were to, look for some, comparisons or some things that we do, we both open the button really, really wide, and oftentimes just for a minimum raise or 2.5x. And so I think that would be a pretty good option. I know my button results have been really strong over the years, and it's been a great source of profit. And I guess the only reason I'm just sharing all this is because I can't really come up with a guaranteed lock, I should say rock solid reason why you would raise that wide on the button for min, other than, like I said, I've done it, and Nanonoko's done it, and we've done it with, we've had excellent win rates over the years, and that's basically my case. I mean, that's all I can say, because it's really hard for me to articulate all of the reasons why it would be correct to raise the button and have it be sort of this airtight case that I'm making for it. It's just somewhat of a feel thing, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So at the king-queen off, we get 3-bet. I just went ahead and without, it's the first time I believe he's 3-bet me in the absence of a whole lot of information. I think it's probably the better play just to fold. Jack 4 suited, somewhat of a trashy hand there, so I'd certainly like it back now, but I think overall we're going to be wise to get rid of the hand right there. And so River Ratty, who we've identified as this sort of predictable player, check calls there. I imagine he probably checks this river a lot. Well, he went ahead and led, so might have actually been check calling a flush draw and went for value on the flush river. I would think you'd be somewhat scared of, say, making an $11 with a hand as weak as, say, pocket sixes, which is kind of what it looks like he has, is some kind of pocket sixes or flush draw. Not a bad spot to check call a flush draw because it's hard to represent much else with a check raise other than a flush draw. So your hand actually gets a little more predictable with a check raise than it might be with a check call. I think here's a pretty good spot for a squeeze with the king 10 off. If we think River Ratty's going to play pretty well, he does sort of the turbo call. I think I'm going to make smallish bets and eventually, probably, depending on a lot of turns and rivers, just go ahead and barrel off my whole stack here. I think it's probably a pretty good play. I think he's just going to have hands like pocket eights so much that's just going to eventually fold by the river. Wow, not the best river card there, because I think so often he has a hand like pocket sevens or pocket fives when he quickly calls on the turn there. I'd be really disappointed in myself though if I don't. Oh God, even if he does have a pocket hand like pocket nines, there's not a whole lot for me to represent. It's really hard for me to have a 5 in my hand 3-betting, and he quickly stuffs. So I think he did have a hand like pocket fives, pocket sevens, which is kind of an unfortunate river. I was just hoping for another brick, and I thought that he would sort of throw up by the river and fold. Yeah, kind of tough. This session's actually been highly annoying so far, if I'm being honest. It's kind of one of those I can't get anything to work, but you just have to battle through those types of sessions where you make. I felt like I set him up pretty well there in the sense that, I know he's going to be folding or probably calling, but playing pretty badly post flop. And badly being straightforward in a 3-bet pot, I think to play straightforward in a 3-bet pot, I think is bad in general. You're gonna need to have a few tricks up your sleeve against good opponents. And when he calls that flop, I figured if I bet that flop and he calls, his hand would be fairly face up, and that I would probably get a call or two, but he would fold by the river, and I just needed the board to somewhat cooperate, but it didn't happen this time, and that's just is what it is. So not really a great turn card here with the 6. Might be a candidate for giving up. Usually when I raise under the gun and then someone check calls, I'm oftentimes check calls the flop. I'm oftentimes barreling, just because they're rarely strong. And I think on this board I'm going to have to make a little bet on the river and hope to get a fold here. Just hope I can represent something that gets him to fold from time to time. And he did. I was just hoping, I don't even know, to be honest. I mean, I'm guessing just some hand like, just a 1-pair type hand, or would fold, maybe an underpair to the board. You just check really quickly, so I mean, just think he's gonna be checking and deciding, and if he's checking and deciding, and I'm making a bet that only needs to work maybe a third of the time, then I guess it's probably profitable. So that's what I decided to do. It's probably pretty close. I mean, if I was against a much better opponent, who knows, I would probably always bet a 9 there on the turn. Then which I'm sure I would, then I may not. That would just be a quick check call for those opponents. But against an opponent who maybe doesn't understand my ranges that well, or how I'd play a certain hand, I think it's fine. And I'm going to go ahead and 3-bet the Queen 8 suited. A little loose, but we're trying to play some pots here. So, and I'll stab with the King Jack suited. I'm pretty likely giving up on this type of board if he just flats and he raises, so there's really nothing to talk about there. We'll just go ahead and fold it. And we get the good old 4-bet, and our hand kind of sucks, so we're just going to go ahead and fold there. So this actually, it's good to have sessions like these sometimes, because I know a lot of y'all, and it's the same for everyone, get some sessions where maybe you're excited, you've watched a video, you watched all these plays work, and then you put them into action on your own, and then nothing works, and then you get frustrated. And believe me, we've all been there. So in some ways, it's good to watch these types of videos, because you can see that even though you can craft out some plays that are really good in theory, sometimes in action they go poorly, and it's important to just maintain a level head about them. Don't give up on the plays, because when you do that is basically when you're admitting defeat, and you'll never improve if you're not trying new things, and especially if you're not trying new things that are founded in a lot of solid results, which I would hope you'd trust that I wouldn't be advertising plays that didn't work, and I'm sure nobody would accuse me of that. So, these plays are good, and they're not working at the moment. Nothing's working, in fact, and we're not really flopping anything. But that's just the way poker goes sometimes, and it's going to be frustrating. And it's the reason. It's the reason why Jared Tendler, my sports psychologist, who just wrote a book called The Mental Game of Poker, he's also a coach here at Drag the Bar. It's the reason he exists in the poker world, I should say. It's a challenge to deal with poker sometimes, but you just gotta hang tough and play your best. So we're probably going to be wrapping up this video here, and we'll go on to part 2, which will probably be out in a week or two after you've seen this video. So with that in mind, we'll go ahead and wrap up the session. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope to see you guys in the forums.